We are extremely fortunate to have with us today presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, Mr. Gary Johnson. Before he joins us, let me give you a little background about the man who is presently seeking your vote for the highest office in the nation. Mr. Johnson's ancestors originated in Denmark, Norway, and Russia. He grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Minot, North Dakota, where his family was a teacher and where his mother worked with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Johnson was the oldest of 3 siblings. In 1975, he graduated with a degree in political science from the University of New Mexico. During his last year of studies, he began working as a part-time handyman. Johnson was a quick study, and in no time at all, he discovered that he had a knack for plumbing, remodeling, and construction. 1 year after graduating college, he started Big J Enterprises. And while the company may have begun as a modest one-man shop, it soon grew into a multi-million-dollar success story. In 1994, when Johnson sold Big J, it employed over 1,000 workers. Gary Johnson sought and won the governorship for the state of New Mexico beginning in 1995. He was a popular governor for 2 terms. And during that period, he exercised his right to veto 750 times, earning him the nickname Governor Veto. He cut taxes 14 times, and when he retired from office in 2003, New Mexico was one of only 4 states in the country with a balanced budget. In 2009, Johnson founded the nonprofit organization Our America Initiative, an advocacy group dedicated to injecting good old common sense business practices into government. Then in April of 2011, he announced his candidacy for the presidency of the United States. Though he began as a Republican candidate, by November of that year, Johnson had made the decision to seek the nomination of the Libertarian Party. We'll find out a little more about that in just a minute. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report the former governor of New Mexico and Libertarian Party candidate for the President of the United States, Mr. Gary Johnson. Welcome to the program, Mr. Johnson.
Rebecca, great to be on. I should just quit while I'm ahead. That was a great introduction. Thank you very much.
Well, I understand you're on the campaign trail in Florida right now. Is that right?
That's right. I get to speak to Paul Fest. Ron Paul supporters are hosting an event for Ron Paul, and I get to speak at that tomorrow afternoon, so I'm excited about that. The notion that Ron Paul and I both are really talking about the same message, the notion that I think my voice is going to be representative of the fastest-growing segment of American politics today, and that would be those that label themselves libertarian in any capacity whatsoever, whether that's libertarian-leaning or libertarian or whatever.
Well, now, before we get too far down the road, I want to be sure I congratulate you on securing a position on the Minnesota ballot.
Well, the ballot access in the states is really difficult. I think what's significant is that I am going to be on the ballot in all 50 states, something that only 3 candidates are going to be able to lay claim to, Romney, Obama, and myself. And it's been hard fought. There are obstacles laid in our way at every juncture, and like I say, at this point right here, I believe that we will achieve that 50-state access. The Libertarian Party celebrates their 40th anniversary this year. In 4 election cycles, they've been on the ballot in all 50 states. It looks like this cycle will be the same. And in second place, among third-party candidates, it's my understanding that the Green Party will be on the ballot in 30 states maximum.
Yeah, I understand. You know, some folks might not know this because I've noticed that the media has not been as forthcoming in providing opportunities for you to get your platform out there. But you began as a Republican candidate, and despite polling higher than Santorum or Huntsman, many listeners may not know that you were excluded from 3 Republican debates before making the decision to switch parties. Is that correct?
Actually, it was many more than that.
Really?
I think there were well over 20 debates. About halfway through the debates, they stopped issuing criteria for the debates. But really, CNN's the one that cast this all in stone. The second debate they hosted, they said that I had to be at 1% in A, B, and C polls. Rebecca, I wasn't in A, B, and C polls. And then about 10 months ago, they included me for the first time in their biweekly poll. At that time, I was tied with Kane at 2%. I was ahead of Santorum. I was ahead of Huntsman. They had a debate coming up in a couple of weeks. We're thinking, well, this is finally behind us. That was the last time my name appeared in any of their polls. They excluded my name after that poll with no explanation whatsoever. And then CNBC, their first debate that they hosted, they issued two criteria. It was on the web, be registered to run for president, and be at 4% in any national poll over the prior year. Well, I was at 4% in Gallup, and I was registered to run as President of the United States, and they would not return our calls as to why I was not given a seat at the table.
So my question to you is, now that you're running 7% in states like Colorado, is the media being a little more friendly and fair?
Actually, not. And
that's disappointing.
I don't want this to come off as a complaint as much as just...
No, I think you have a right to complain, actually.
Well, as a report on the reality of running as a third party. So right now, I might be the most underreported, let's say it's 5%, conservatively speaking, nationally. I might be the most underreported 5% nationally of all time. Imagine if in the newspaper tomorrow you woke up, got the daily newspaper, and it reported me at 5%. Well, the overwhelming reaction would be, well, who the hell is Gary Johnson? Well, that's really what I need, is who the hell is Gary Johnson, and that people would check it out and actually recognize that there is a resume to go along with running for president.
Absolutely, and I feel that the media is a bit delinquent in their responsibility. One of the primary functions that the media can serve in a year such as this is to make sure that the information of all candidates gets out to the American people and let the American people make their own mind up.
Well, I do believe that, and there are some really big differences between myself and the other two candidates. I want to end the war. I want to end the spending. I'm proposing the fair tax. I think we have a growing police state. I do believe that marriage equality is something that is constitutionally guaranteed. I want to end the drug wars. These are very, very significant differences between myself and the other two, and I recognize there are other third-party candidates, but none of them are going to get close to this 50-state ballot access.
That's absolutely right, and I hope that you will be included in the presidential debates. How is that shaping up, the national presidential debates? Will you be included in those?
Well, they've set two criteria for those. Three. Actually, one is be on the ballot in enough states to actually be able to win the presidency, which I am, and then the other is 15% in the national polls. Well, right now, of the 18 national polling organizations, only 3 of those polling organizations are including my name. So,
well, if you're not on the poll, I don't think you're going to get to 15%. How's that?
That's a very fair recognition.
Oh, we have to take a short commercial break. When we come back, let's jump right into where you stand on deficit, drugs, and defense. Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and our guest today is the Libertarian candidate for president, Mr. Gary Johnson. And before the break, you were pointing out that one of the criteria for being included in the presidential debates is that you have to show at least 15% in the polls. But if your name isn't even on the polls, it's going to be pretty hard to get any percentage. So far, as we know it, you meet the requirements for being on the ballot of enough states, but you may not meet the polling requirement. Is that right?
That's correct. You know, I also wanted to plug a website, and maybe you've done this, but it's isidewith.com. Have you seen that website?
I have not.
Well, isidewith.com. Get online, answer 36 questions. At the end of the 36 questions, they pair you up with the presidential candidate most in line with your views. 1.8.
Oh, I love that. That you will be able to put your views in there. You input your views in there, and then they'll tell you which one you're most aligned with.
Yep, it's
fabulous,
and it only takes a few minutes. It was really user friendly, and based on the 1.8 million people, it's a lot of attention being given to it. But I won't even tell you what the outcome of it is. I'll just ask that everybody take the take the quiz and see what happens.
Now, one of the things that you've done on your website is make it very easy for voters to see where you stand on the issues. You have a chart which compares yours, Romney, and Obama's positions. So for the benefit of our audience today, let's try to hit some of these issues one by one. The first one is spending and the deficit. So how does your record stack up against Obama and Romney?
Well, I did distinguish myself as governor of New Mexico, perhaps vetoing more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed 750 bills. I had thousands of line-item vetoes as governor of New Mexico. New Mexico is a state that's 2-1 Democrat. I ran as an outsider in the Republican Party. I got elected. What I think speaks volumes. And by the way, only 2 of those vetoes were overridden. But what I think speaks volumes is the fact that I got reelected by a bigger margin the second time than the first time by being a penny pincher. I just think it speaks to the fact that people really appreciate good stewardship of tax dollars. So that said, I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I believe the biggest threat to our way of life is the fact that we're borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. I believe that we are not immune from the mathematics of what we're doing, and that we will experience a monetary collapse as a result of continuing to do what we're doing. And a monetary collapse, very simply, it's when the dollars that we have in our pocket don't buy a thing because of the accompanying inflation that goes along with borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we do spend. So I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Now, that's not promising a balanced budget because Congress is going to have to go along with that, but I'm promising to submit that balanced budget, and I'm also promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue, believing that with those 2 promises kept, spending will be lower than any other scenario that you could possibly come up with.
Well, so let me ask you this. How do you respond to folks who say it's not as easy as just saying no to everything and vetoing every initiative, that running a country is not exactly like running a business because we don't want to live in a country where children are starving to death and people are laying outside of emergency rooms dying? How do you respond to that?
Well, that I did get to serve 2 terms as governor of New Mexico. And all those vetoes, those were the exact accusations that followed every single
Precisely.
one of my vetoes.
Precisely. That's why I wanted you to have an opportunity to address it, because people always go to that argument.
Well, and that is the argument, that the sky is going to fall, that people are going to be dead in the streets, that children are going to starve, that these are essential government services, that without this funding, things are going to collapse. Well, I should have gotten handed my head in a state that's 2-1 Democrat by being as fiscally conservative.
Yes, you should have. I agree.
I get reelected by a bigger margin than the first time. What I want to point out is if we don't cut Medicare spending by 43%, we're not going to have any health care for those over 65. If we don't cut Medicaid spending by 43%, we're going to find ourselves with no health care to the poor. I oversaw Medicaid reform in the state of New Mexico. We took it from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model. We saved hundreds of millions of dollars, and we set up better health care networks to deliver health care to the poor. Mm-hmm. I believe at that time, if the federal government would have block granted the state of New Mexico 43% less money, mm-hmm. done away with all the strings and the mandates associated on how health care needs to be delivered to the poor, that I could have effectively overseen health care delivery to the poor.
So would you rather see the health care initiatives handled by states as opposed to ratcheted up to a federal level?
That's the only way I see getting out of this. Get the federal government out of health care delivery completely, devolve it to the states, both Medicaid and Medicare, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and I think that's exactly what we will have. I think we'll have fabulous success that will get emulated. I also think there'll be some horrible failure that will get avoided, But the notion that Washington knows best, that Washington top-down has all the answers, I reject that. And that has us in this, really, in a position of imminent collapse. And that's my opinion. And you can just look to Russia for another country where a country did experience a monetary collapse. The ruble went from being worth something one day to being worth nothing the next, and that happened in the late 80s. And they have yet to recover from that. And that's where we are going to find ourselves.
Is it safe to say that aside from initiatives such as defense and those kinds of policies, that you would like to see more power decentralized and handed over to the states again?
Absolutely. And then let's just focus for a second on military spending. Look, I think the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we are borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. So I will be proposing a reduction in military spending of 43%. That takes us back to 2003 spending levels, so that's certainly not the end of the world. And a 43% reduction in military spending. How does that work out? Well, it's reducing nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. It's getting out of all of the military conflicts that we're currently engaged in. Let's stop with our military interventions and the unintended consequence that goes along with all of those interventions. Let's reduce the military footprint. That would be bases and military personnel stationed in Europe, Japan, South Korea. It would also be research and development and intelligence. But if we don't do this, we're going to find ourselves in a position of being able to offer ourselves no national defense. And by the way, I think defense here is the operative word. President of the United States, government has an obligation to provide us with a strong national defense. But defense is the operative word, not offense and not nation building.
I agree with you, and I think that sometimes we become confused between offensive strategies and defensive strategies. It's an easy thing to do in a complex world. I apologize, but we have to take another short commercial break. When we come back, we'll take a stab at gun rights, defense, a little bit more on defense, and marriage equality. Stay with us. You're listening to the Costa Report. Before we went to the break, we were talking about the confusion we often have between offensive military measures and defensive strategies. So, Mr. Johnson, how would you characterize our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Well, initially, I thought that our intervention in Afghanistan was totally warranted. We were attacked. We attacked back. Our war was with al-Qaeda. I would argue, though, that after having been in Afghanistan for 6 months, that we wiped out al-Qaeda. That was 11 years ago. We should have gotten out of Afghanistan 11 years ago. Iraq, on the other hand, I was opposed to from the very beginning, before we went in. I know there was talk of weapons of mass destruction, but what I said back in 2003 was, hey, don't we have the military surveillance capability to see them roll out any weapons of mass destruction? If they do that, we have all sorts of options available. But if we go in, we're going to find ourselves in a civil war to which there would be no end. Let's look at our unintended consequences of going into Iraq. We go into Iraq, we take out Saddam Hussein. That is Iran's only concern every single day, is what's Iraq going to do to us today? What's Saddam Hussein going to do to us today? We take them out. That's the reason that Iran is raising its head right now. And I would be the only candidate that doesn't want to bomb Iran.
Well, we took out their natural enemy for them.
We took out their natural enemy for them. Let's not forget that after 9/11, the largest demonstration in the world in support of the United States was in Tehran. That was Iran that had the largest demonstration in.
Well, they couldn't wait for us to go in there.
Well, so here it is. If we go and we bomb Iran. And by the way, we should be vigilant to any threats, but they're not a threat. And if we bomb Iran today, it's going to be a 2-year bombing maintenance program. And as a result of doing this, I believe we're going to make another 100 million enemies to this country that we would not otherwise have. Innocent people are going to die, and million-plus demonstration of support to the United States, that's going to turn out to be 100 million that will do anything they can to get revenge against the United States.
So is it fair to say that you feel Obama's foreign policy has been on the borderline of offensive?
Well, in my opinion, President Obama said three really favorable things when he was running. He said more favorable things than just three, but when it came to the wars, I thought he said some very favorable things. I thought when he talked about reassessing Afghanistan in 2009 that we were getting out of Afghanistan. Well, he doubled down. I also thought he said some really favorable things regarding gay rights, and I also think he said some very favorable things regarding drug policy, none of which have transpired.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move on to the war on drugs. I know you have some very strong opinions about how we've handled that.
Well, I believe that I favor legalizing marijuana, control it, regulate it, tax it. We now have 2.3 million people behind bars in this country. We have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. Half of what we spend on law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons is drug-related. We're actually at a tipping point, I think, in this country right now. 50% of Americans support legalizing marijuana. That number has never been this high. Why is that the case? Well, it's that people are talking about it, and that's what we should be doing in this country. We should be talking, discussing, debating these really important issues. But I think what people recognize is that this is completely similar to prohibition of alcohol. Mm-hmm. Look, disputes were being played out with guns rather than the courts. Looking at border violence right now with Mexico. 40,000 deaths south of the border. This is a prohibition phenomenon here. I happen to believe that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition-related, not use-related. That is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus. So in Colorado this fall, it's on the ballot in Colorado to regulate marijuana like alcohol. People are going to get to vote on that. 6 years ago, citizens in Denver voted to decriminalize marijuana on a campaign based on marijuana being safer than alcohol. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke marijuana, but I have drank alcohol and I have smoked marijuana. And in my own particular circumstance, there is no category where marijuana is more dangerous than alcohol. 500,000 Denver citizens agreed with me on that. I have always said that if we legalize marijuana, it will lead to less overall substance abuse because people will find marijuana as a safer alternative than alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you point out, the polls indicate that at least half of Americans are done with trying to put up a resistance to this because our court systems, our prisons are jammed up, and we have all kinds of border problems that we can't get on top of. So let's talk a little bit about gun rights. Where do you come down on the right to own guns, particularly these rapid firearms?
Well, I don't think the Second Amendment could be clearer, and I am in the camp that believes that if you outlaw guns of any caliber or any rapid-fire gun, if you're going to ban that rapid-fire gun, the only people with rapid-fire guns will be criminals. Mm-hmm. And
so you don't want to see any restriction on that, but you wouldn't want someone to be able to buy a rocket launcher.
Well, no, you wouldn't want to see a rocket launcher. But if I
mean, this is a tough question because you got to draw the line somewhere, and no matter where you draw it, it's going to be a controversy, right?
Well, no matter where you draw it, the people that will be left with rocket launchers will be those that
the bad guys. The bad guys will have the really heavy-duty weapons, and we'll have sticks and rocks.
And if you look at the most egregious cases of, let's just take the drug war as an example. If you look at the most egregious cases that exist. And I'm not suggesting this, Rebecca, but the most egregious cases are where government knocks down the doors and actually shoots people in their homes. Would they be engaged in that kind of conduct? And I'm talking about the most egregious examples. Would they be engaged in that conduct if they knew the owners of that home owned a tank? Maybe not.
Well, I've talked to a lot of police officers about this, and if they think that there's any possibility that the person inside the apartment or the house that they're knocking the door down on is armed, they tend to get juiced up and they tend to be more battle ready. So I can see the argument going either way, right?
Well, I think of the example in California where the couple was accused of, or the contention was they were growing marijuana on their property. They beat down the doors. The fellow involved had no idea who was beating down their doors. Came out with a weapon in hand. I think it was a handgun, and both of them were shot dead. Mm-hmm. Would they? Well, it's a difficult issue, but I'm just in the camp of, number one, that this is a constitutionally guaranteed right, and then number two, if we start banning these weapons, those with these banned weapons will be criminals and no defense from law-abiding citizens.
I've always been curious about why we just don't have a longer waiting time. You know, let's not keep people from having weapons, but let's have your application has to last for, let's say, a year, because people can kind of hold it together for 30, 60, 90 days. It's been my experience. But, you know, if you make somebody be on their best behavior for a year, if they're insane or they have a record of violence, it's bound to pop up in a 12-month period of time, right? And so I kind of feel like, why can't we just have a longer period of time without preventing anyone from getting a weapon? But you have to wait a long time.
Well, and I'm sure you've thought through this too. The woman who is threatened by the ex-husband who is armed and is fearful for her children and her life, and goes and seeks a weapon to potentially defend herself from that situation.
Should she have to wait a year? I see your point. We have to take our last break, and when we come back, we're going to find out how you feel about Republicans who worry that in a close election, you may pose a Nader Gore threat to Romney's campaign. You're listening to the Costa Report. So by all accounts, it looks as though this is going to be a close election. And from a historical perspective, the closer the election, the more likely the third-party candidate will get blamed for spoiling the election for either the Democratic or Republican candidate. It happened to Ross Perot and more recently to Ralph Nader. So as of today, it looks as if the independent vote in 7 or 8 states may be the deciding factor. So how do you answer Republicans who worry that independents who vote for you may cause Obama to win over Romney?
Well, first of all, I contend that I'm going to take from both sides, from the Democrats that really do care about dollars and cents and do care about civil liberties. Democrats not doing so good on civil liberties of late and doing horribly on dollars and cents. Republicans, who historically have been good on dollars and cents, not so good of late, and not really are horrible when it comes to civil liberties. So this has actually been put to the test in 4 different states where they've polled this. And in 2 states, I take more votes from Obama. 2 states, I take more from Romney. Rebecca, I wanted to point out a poll that was done by the ACLU. It wasn't a poll, it was actually a study. And they issued a report card on all the presidential candidates and how they did on civil liberties. Mm-hmm. 24 liberty torches was a perfect score. I think this is really important. Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum, 0 liberty torches out of 24. Newt Gingrich, 4 liberty torches out of 24. President Obama, 16 liberty torches out of 24. Ron Paul, 18 out of 24. Gary Johnson, 21 out of 24. And then I would like, it's...
Now, what did the torches indicate? For our audience, let's spell it out. What did getting that many torches mean about you as a candidate?
That civil liberties really are important. The notion of the Constitution, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, civil liberties. I would not have signed the National Defense Authorization Act, allowing for U.S. citizens to be arrested and detained without being charged. I would like to see the Patriot Act repealed. I think we have a growing police state in this country and that it needs to be addressed and that it's getting worse and it's not getting better, and that our civil liberties are being eroded. And I think this is why we fought wars. I don't think we fought wars over Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security.
I think you're right. I think we have fought wars over our civil liberties, and I think that the Patriot Act is not in keeping with what our founding fathers had in mind. Why do you suppose that got through? I mean, how did the Patriot Act get through, in your view? Is this just a case where we're fearful? We're fearful of the economy. We're fearful of terrorists. We're fearful of unemployment. We're fearful that our children won't be educated, that we're falling behind China and India. I mean, are we just so fearful we're going to let anything get through?
I think the root of all evil are politicians that beat their chest and tell you that to save the world, to save us against the illegal immigrant, to save us against drugs, to save us against poor health care, to save us against terrorism, vote for me, and this is what I will do. And in the name of vote for me and this is what I will do, I think that's why men and service women are coming back to this country in body bags or with their limbs blown off, and I'm outraged over this. I'm outraged over the fact that these are politicians that have done this to us. And isn't politics supposed to be about leadership and not following? And now we're back to the Patriot Act. And, everybody is so fearful, and politicians are so fearful of not doing something that they'll do something that ends up having unintended consequence. That unintended consequence, TSA, the Constitution-free zone, that I subject myself to more times than I even want to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I do understand. Now, you're aware that third-party candidates have a very rough road in this country because even the election commission is comprised of Republican and Democratic representatives. So you've chosen a rough road. I mean, you elected to be the Libertarian candidate. So let me ask you, what are you going to do to get a third party really get some traction in this country? Because it just doesn't seem to happen. I mean, people, and I want to encourage people again to go to I Side With. That's a website where they can plug in their personal views and see which candidate they most match up with. And I love that site, and I'm going to promote the heck out of it in shows that come up between now and November. But the point I'm making is that we can't seem to get a third party off the ground here. What are you going to do to make that happen?
Well, I don't know if I end up making it happen, but if I don't...
But I need you to. I need you to, Mr. Johnson, because we fix a lot of problems in this country, as you know, a math problem in terms of voting when we get a strong third party.
I totally agree, Rebecca, and I'm doing all that I can possibly do. I think there are thousands that, if given the opportunity, would do what I'm doing. I've been given that opportunity. I think when people talk about a wasted vote, what is more of a wasted vote than voting for somebody that you don't agree with, or that you're making a judgment that it's the lesser of two evils? How about actually voting for somebody you believe in? And I appreciate you touting the I Side With again. Let's make this.
I don't know of anybody who's voting for who they believe in. What they're doing is they're voting for the candidate that is least offensive in order to prevent the candidate that is most offensive from getting into office. It's a blocking vote. It's not an advocacy vote. It's a vote to block the other guy.
I saw something, and I'm sure Romney is the same, but I saw that Obama ran 82,000 negative ads against Romney in the month. I'm sure Romney is guilty of the same. I will tell you, running for governor of New Mexico 2 times in a state that was 2-1 Democrat, I did not mention my opponent in print, radio, or television in 2 elections running for governor of New Mexico. I really think that people are hungry to vote for somebody as opposed to the lesser of two evils.
That's correct, and I think that what we need right now is an inspired leader, someone who will tell us the truth, offer some practical solutions, and get working.
Well, and that was my pledge to, now I'm back to my resume, my pledge as governor of New Mexico was issues first, politics last. the controversy that surrounded me in New Mexico was that it was always about the issues. Mm-hmm. And that's the debate and the discussion that should rage, is the issues. And how do you address these issues? When Republicans are, in my opinion, disingenuously saying that Romney says he wants to balance the budget, but that we should increase our spending for the military and that we should hold Medicare intact. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, I finished the second grade, and there was a mathematics requirement that went along with finishing the second grade, and it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't add up. Okay, last but not least, where can listeners today go to get more information and to contribute to your campaign?
Well, GaryJohnson2012.com, and you've touted that website I side with. And I just want to tell you, this has been an absolute pleasure. I thank you very much for having me on your show, and it's terrific. Best wishes for continued success to yourself.
Thank you so much, and I'd like to also extend great success to your campaign in Florida. And if you come out this way to California, I hope you'll stop by the studio and visit us again. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
I'll hold you to that. Thank
Absolutely.
you very much. All right.